Hey guys, Benji here doing the question of the week. Question of the week is, what was your first job? There's also a question that goes along with it. Who was your first boss and what were they like? So I figure I might as well knock these both out at the same time. So my first job was being an umpire, and I did it for most of my older childhood, I'll call it. Now, this doesn't include like babysitting here and there. I didn't do a whole lot of that, but every once in a while I would babysit like the Evans, Matthew, and Nathan, and maybe a couple other random people from church. But I mean, we're talking, yeah, 5 or 8 times ever. So I don't really count that as my first job. My first job was being an umpire. Is you had to go to the field, you had to show up when the game started, you had to work, you had to wait till it was over, and then go home, right? So that's what I consider a first job. But so that was my first job. I probably started, man, I would guess I was probably seventh grade, eighth grade, sixth grade, probably seventh grade, um, somewhere about there. And so yeah, I started doing, you start off doing t-ball, and it's miserable. Luckily, I was a little bit, I got decent quick because we didn't do t-ball very long until we went to machine pitch. And when I say we, I mean Eric Schmidt was my partner. You have umpiring partners. Doesn't mean that you always umpire with that person, but for the most part you do. You've got one person calling balls and strikes behind the plate and one person out in the field making all the calls at the bases. Um, I actually love being an umpire. I don't know why. A lot of people look at it and think, oh my gosh, that seems scary. You got older parents yelling at you and everything. But actually, if you do a good job, and you know the rules, like I actually studied a lot. I studied more than Eric did. I knew the rules a lot better than him. But as long as somebody in your little crew, your little partnership, knows the rules, you'll kind of be fine. And then you talk about them a lot with other umpires, because if you're at a baseball fields, like a group of fields. I mean, there's typically, 10, 12, sometimes 20 umpires around, and most of the games are kind of on the same, 2 hour time period, or if you're doing t-ball, it's 1 hour, but everybody kind of ends at the same time, and, it's hot out, so you go get Gatorade or water and snack and all that kind of good stuff. So you talk to each other, and somebody had a crazy rule to come up, and so you learn some rules. So you could learn rules that way, but as long as you studied a little bit, knew what you were doing, and you got good at it. Luckily, Eric and I both were probably overly confident young kids. We both played basketball together, and so we became good friends from that. And then we started umpiring, right? So it was a nice, easy thing to do, and you talk about calls a lot. But anyway, here's why it was a great job and why I did it all through. I mean, I think through 12th grade, if I can remember. I mean, for sure through 11th, I can remember doing it. But I think it was through 12th grade. I think it was all the way through because it was such a good job. Because you would work, let's call it 4 hours in a night. You do 2 games on a night. Like maybe you did Tuesday and Thursday. But those games, you get paid. I mean, when you're doing t-ball, you're not making very much. You're probably making $10 a game. But as you get older, I mean, at the end, we were making $60 a game for a 2 hour game. So you're making $120 in a night this is 1990, 88, 90, 92, somewhere in that period of 5 or 6 years when I was doing this. And that was good and that was nice. And the night games are great because it's cooler out. Your first game's kind of hot, and so you switch off with your partner. Like, hey, I did the first game last night. You do the first game this night, because out in the field's a pretty easy job as an umpire. I mean, you really have about 2 or 3 calls in a game. Maybe there's lots of games where you don't make a single call, not more than, guy at first, like, out, ball beat him. There's some stolen bases, but most calls actually they don't need calls. And as you get older, you actually learn that. You actually learn that most calls out in the field don't require a call. They just require a signal, right? So a guy is way thrown out, and you can just go, out. Or if he's safe, you're just like, safe. There's not many times where you're like, you get into it and yell and do a big, he's out. That happens twice a game. So when you're in the field, a lot of times the home plate umpire kind of keeps you on your toes, like, hey, hey, keep in mind, we got infield flying effect, or hey, we got force, or hey, bases loaded, I'll take their, there's different calls you're making to each other. But the guy in the field kind of can relax. A lot of times, if it's a decent, as you get older, the pitchers are probably better than the batters. For a lot of times, that is the case. Once they get above, machine pitch, the pitchers kind of start to dominate. So you spend a lot of time when you're the field umpire down the first base line, and there's ground balls, and you call them out, and there's strikeouts, and there's some walks here and there, but it's a pretty easy gig. But the best part about the job, which I haven't gotten to, is on the weekends, is the tournaments, right? So a tournament comes in, so you would work the entire weekend. A lot of times you start Friday night, you might do 2, 3, 4 games because they kind of go later in tournaments. And then you start back up at like 8 in the morning and you go until 10 o'clock at night. But the tournament pay is typically double. So you might be making 120 a game. And then if you do the championship game of whatever league you're doing, and Eric and I were always really good, so we would get championship games and we would get the top ones. So a lot of times you're making $200 something for the championship game. So you might make $1,200 on a weekend as a 16, 17-year-old kid. And so I just had tons of money. So it was great. So that was my first job. It was awesome. Rod, our head umpire, was our boss, and he was great because he was easy. He actually was a pilot. He would take us up flying every once in a while now and then. And he had a cool car. He had a Camaro convertible, so that was kind of fun. But for the most part, it was just kind of fun. He was easy. He paid us in cash a lot because I think he got a lot of cash from different things. He also sold all the uniforms to all the teams, so he made his money that way, and then was just the head umpire. But that's who paid us. But he was great. Eric ended up working for him for years and years, like 20 years, selling uniforms for him later. So, because he was an easy guy to work for, he was super nice. So he wasn't weird or hard or mean or anything. He was easy. So that job all around was great. And I think it just teaches you to make a decision right now, stick to it. And if somebody yells at you, you got to stand by it. So I think that part was good. It helps build confidence and makes you understand that you can talk to people. And then if you're good at it and you take it serious, you get good. And then the coaches respect you and they like seeing you on their games. Like, oh, good, you guys are doing our fields. This is great. We know we're not going to have a whole lot of issues, because a lot of times there's guys that show up first year and they suck and the games are a mess and the strike zone's horrible and don't know the rules. But for me, yeah, it was great. I love that job. So that's my answer.